on 13, we've got new video of the moment a mother was shot to death in front of her two young children. It shows a man walk into her Willowbrook area apartment this morning, and then you hear nearly a dozen gunshots. ABC 13's Luke Jones is live at police headquarters with the latest on the investigation, and the video you'll only see on 13. Luke?
I know, but he shot my mom. These devastating words, spoken by a 6-year-old boy to neighbors at a bus stop, shattered the quiet morning at Willow Green Apartments in northwest Harris County. The child should have been heading to school. Instead, he was fleeing a nightmare no child should ever witness. Welcome to True Crime Malice, where we examine the darkest moments of human behavior to understand how they could have been prevented. If you're new here, hit subscribe now to join our community seeking justice through awareness. The clock began ticking on Monday, September 30th, 2024. That morning, Howard Ruffin walked out of Harris County Jail a free man, despite a documented history of violence against his girlfriend Jackelyn Wilson. The 39-year-old had made explicit threats against her life, threats that neighbors had overheard and reported. "Okay, B, I'm gonna kill you." Those weren't empty words, they were a declaration of intent, a promise made in anger that would be fulfilled with methodical precision just 48 hours later. What makes this case particularly haunting isn't just the brutality of the crime, but how predictable it was. Every red flag was visible, every warning sign flashed bright. The system had multiple opportunities to intervene, yet at each critical juncture, communication broke down, protocols failed, and Jackelyn Wilson was left unprotected. A security camera would later capture the entire encounter, from Ruffin's arrival at Jackelyn's apartment to his departure just 25 seconds later. In less than half a minute, 4 children lost their mother, a family was destroyed, and a community was left questioning how such a tragedy could happen when the danger was so clearly documented. As we examine the events leading to October 2nd, 2024, we'll uncover not just one failure, but a cascade of missed opportunities across multiple jurisdictions that allowed a man who had previously strangled his girlfriend to walk free and fulfill his deadly promise. What happens when the system designed to protect becomes part of the problem? And how many more Jackelyns are out there right now living under similar threats, hoping someone will take them seriously before it's too late? Jackelyn Wilson moved through life with the quiet determination of a woman whose world revolved around her 4 children. At 32, the Northwest Harris County mother structured her days around school drop-offs, homework sessions, and creating moments of joy despite limited resources. Neighbors often saw her walking her children to the bus stop each morning, checking backpacks and straightening collars. Small gestures that revealed her dedication. "She was all about those kids," recalled a neighbor who often exchanged greetings with Jackelyn at the Willow Green Apartments. "You could tell they were her everything." What few people saw was the growing tension behind closed doors. Howard Ruffin entered Jackelyn's life approximately 5 years before her death. According to her mother, Denise Bibbs, the relationship seemed manageable at first, enough that Bibbs welcomed Ruffin into family gatherings and treated him like a son. "I welcomed him into my home," Bibbs would later tell reporters, her voice breaking. "And he repaid me by taking my daughter from me." The first documented incident of violence occurred in 2021, though conversations with family members suggest the abuse began much earlier. Like many victims, Jackelyn kept much of her suffering private, perhaps out of shame, fear, or the misplaced hope that things would improve. By 2022, the relationship had deteriorated significantly. Court records reveal a particularly violent episode where Ruffin repeatedly struck Jackelyn in the face while driving. When she attempted to defend herself, he began choking her, a form of assault that domestic violence experts identify as one of the strongest predictors of eventual homicide. In desperation, Jackelyn jumped from the moving vehicle. Bruised and traumatized, she flagged down passing motorists who called emergency services. When police arrived, they documented bruises covering her body, yet Jackelyn declined medical attention and stated she didn't wish to participate in an investigation. This response, seemingly contradictory to outsiders, is actually common among abuse victims who fear retaliation or lack faith in the system's ability to protect them. During her ride home with officers, Jackelyn made a cryptic statement that haunts this case. She told police she was in trouble but wouldn't elaborate. The officer, sensing danger, requested an emergency protective order, a request that somehow vanished into bureaucratic limbo, never to be granted. Denise Bibbs watched her daughter's relationship with growing alarm. "I've told her to leave him," Bibbs later recalled. "Leave him alone. This cannot get any better, it can only get worse." Her words proved prophetic. As the relationship continued, neighbors reported hearing increasingly hostile arguments. Ruffin's control tactics escalated, following the textbook progression of domestic abuse: isolation, intimidation, and threats. "When you're in a domestic violence relationship," Bibbs explained, "nobody ever thinks their partner's going to kill them. I wouldn't have thought he would have done that." By late September 2024, Jackelyn had reached her breaking point. After years of abuse and broken promises, she made the decision that domestic violence experts identify as the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship. She decided to leave. On Monday, September 30th, the very day Howard Ruffin was released from jail on bond, Jackelyn threw his belongings out of their shared apartment. It was an act of courage and determination. It was also, unknowingly, the trigger for a countdown that would end with her children running for help at a bus stop, carrying news no child should ever have to deliver. What happened in the 48 hours after Jackelyn finally stood her ground? And why was the man who had threatened her life allowed to walk free at the exact moment she was most vulnerable? Howard Devin Ruffin's path to becoming a murderer wasn't sudden. It was paved with escalating violence and a justice system that repeatedly failed to recognize the danger he posed. His criminal record reads like a textbook case study in how domestic abusers progress toward lethal violence when left unchecked. The documented trail begins in Walker County, Texas in 2021. Court records show Ruffin was convicted of assaulting a family member, a charge that should have triggered enhanced monitoring and intervention. Instead, he served just 3 days in jail before returning to the streets. This laughably brief sentence sent a dangerous message: that his violence carried minimal consequences. For those who study domestic abuse patterns, this light punishment represents a critical missed opportunity. Research consistently shows that first interventions must be meaningful to break the cycle of violence. Ruffin's 3-day sentence was anything but meaningful. It was barely an inconvenience. By October 2022, Ruffin had turned his violent tendencies toward Jackelyn Wilson. The attack that occurred while he was driving revealed not just rage but a calculated attempt to trap his victim. When Jackelyn tried to defend herself, Ruffin escalated to strangulation, a tactic that domestic violence experts identify as a critical predictor of eventual homicide. When someone strangles their partner, they're demonstrating their ability and willingness to kill, explains a domestic violence prosecutor not connected to this case. They're controlling the very breath of their victim. It's one of the most reliable indicators that homicide could follow. The fact that Jackelyn jumped from a moving vehicle demonstrates how desperate she was to escape, risking severe injury or death from the fall rather than remaining in the car with Ruffin. This extreme action speaks volumes about the level of terror she experienced. From the perspective of responding officers that day, the case presented a frustrating challenge. Body camera footage shows them documenting Jackelyn's injuries and expressing concern about her safety. One officer noted in his report, "Victim had visible bruising on neck, face, and arms, consistent with strangulation and repeated blows. Despite injuries, victim refused medical attention and was reluctant to provide details." This reluctance is common among domestic violence victims, who often fear that cooperation with authorities will lead to more severe retaliation. What's uncommon is what happened next, or rather, what didn't happen. The responding officer, recognizing the gravity of the situation, despite Jackelyn's hesitation, took the initiative to request an emergency protective order. This action represented the system working as designed, identifying danger even when victims are too traumatized or frightened to advocate for themselves. Yet somehow this protective order was never issued. For 16 months, the felony assault charge against Ruffin remained open but inactive. No arrests were made, no protection was provided. Jackelyn continued living with the man who had strangled her and threatened her life, while paperwork that could have saved her gathered dust. In April 2023, a routine traffic stop in Maverick County near the Texas-Mexico border should have changed everything. When officers ran Ruffin's information, they discovered the outstanding felony warrant from Harris County. They arrested him on the spot. A moment that should have marked the beginning of accountability and safety for Jackelyn. Instead, it became the most catastrophic failure point in a system already riddled with gaps. Maverick County officials, for reasons still under investigation, made two critical errors. They categorized Ruffin's felony assault charge as a misdemeanor, and they set his bond at just $7,500, an amount he quickly paid. Most inexplicably, they never notified Harris County authorities about the arrest or bond. For the next 16 months, Howard Ruffin walked free while Harris County authorities believed he was still wanted on an outstanding warrant. The very system designed to track and manage dangerous offenders had completely lost track of him. How could such a fundamental breakdown in communication occur between law enforcement agencies in the same state? And what happened when Harris County finally discovered that the man they thought was wanted had actually been free all along? The breakdown that allowed Howard Ruffin to remain free despite his violent history wasn't the result of a single error, but a cascade of institutional failures that compounded with deadly consequences. When Maverick County authorities arrested Ruffin in April 2023, they had access to his complete criminal history. The felony assault charge from Harris County was clearly documented in the National Crime Database, complete with notes about strangulation, a known predictor of homicide. Yet somehow, when processing his case, officials downgraded the charge to a misdemeanor. This wasn't a simple clerical error. It fundamentally altered how the justice system would handle Ruffin. Felony domestic violence charges typically result in higher bonds, stricter release conditions, and mandatory notification protocols between jurisdictions. By miscategorizing the offense, Maverick County officials inadvertently removed these safeguards. The $7,500 bond they set appropriate for a misdemeanor but dangerously inadequate for a felony involving strangulation allowed Ruffin to walk free within hours. He paid the amount without difficulty and disappeared back into the community. What followed was perhaps the most inexplicable failure in this tragic chain of events: complete silence between counties. For 16 months, from April 2023 until September 2024, no one in Maverick County notified Harris County that they had arrested, processed, and released the man Harris County believed was still wanted on an outstanding warrant. This kind of communication breakdown shouldn't be possible in the digital age, noted a criminal justice expert reviewing the case. We have multiple database systems specifically designed to prevent this exact scenario. The consequences of this silence were devastating. While Harris County authorities believed they were still looking for Ruffin, he was living freely and continuing his relationship with Jackelyn Wilson. During these 16 months, neighbors reported multiple disturbing incidents, including verbal threats that would later prove prophetic. Harris County officials only discovered Ruffin's status by accident, exactly 1 week before Jackelyn's murder. On September 25, 2024, when running a routine check on outstanding warrants, they were shocked to discover Ruffin had been processed and released by Maverick County over a year earlier. This discovery triggered an immediate court summons. Ruffin appeared before Judge Dazian Jones in Harris County's 180th court that same day. Despite now having his complete history before them, including the strangulation incident, his previous assault conviction, and the 16 months he'd spent avoiding accountability, the court made a decision that defies comprehension. They maintained his bond at the same $7,500 amount set by Maverick County. No enhanced monitoring was ordered. No protective measures for Jackelyn were implemented. No recognition of the escalating danger was acknowledged. 5 days later, on September 30th, Howard Ruffin walked out of Harris County Jail after posting bond. The system that should have protected Jackelyn had instead released her abuser back into the community at precisely the moment she had decided to end the relationship. What if proper protocols had been followed at any point in this tragic sequence? If Walker County had imposed a meaningful sentence for Ruffin's 2021 assault, he might have received intervention that interrupted his pattern of violence. If the emergency protective order requested after the 2022 strangulation had been granted, Jackelyn would have had legal protection and Ruffin would have faced immediate arrest for any contact attempts. If Maverick County had correctly classified the felony charge and notified Harris County of Ruffin's arrest, he would have been transferred to Harris County custody in 2023, long before the events of October 2024. If Judge Jones had recognized the danger Ruffin posed and denied bond, or set it at an appropriate level for a felony domestic violence case involving strangulation, Jackelyn might still be alive today. Each of these failures represents a moment when the system could have intervened, but didn't. Each represents a missed opportunity to save a life. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this case emerged just days before the murder, when a neighbor overheard Ruffin making an explicit threat, one that should have triggered immediate intervention, but instead went unreported to authorities. The only time I heard him, and I want to say it was within the last week, is when he said, "Okay, B, I'm gonna kill you," the neighbor later told reporters. This wasn't a vague threat or an expression of anger. It was a clear declaration of intent, a promise made in rage that Ruffin was already planning to keep. And as Jackelyn threw his belongings out of their shared apartment on Monday, September 30th, the very day of his release from jail, the countdown to murder had already begun. What would unfold over the next 48 hours would reveal just how determined Howard Ruffin was to make good on his deadly promise. Monday morning, September 30th, 2024, as Howard Ruffin completed his release paperwork at Harris County Jail, Jackelyn Wilson was making a decision that domestic violence experts identify as the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship. She was leaving. Neighbors at Willow Green Apartments witnessed Jackelyn gathering Ruffin's possessions and throwing them outside their shared unit. Her actions were deliberate, methodical, the movements of a woman who had finally reached her breaking point after years of escalating abuse. She was throwing everything out, recalled a neighbor who observed the scene. Clothes, shoes, electronics. She wasn't yelling or making a scene, she just looked determined. What Jackelyn couldn't have known was that at that precise moment, Ruffin was walking free, his $7,500 bond paid, his anger already simmering. Court records show he was released at 11:42 a.m., approximately the same time Jackelyn was removing his presence from her home. By Monday evening, Ruffin had discovered what Jackelyn had done. Phone records would later reveal a barrage of text messages and calls from Ruffin to Jackelyn. 22 attempts at contact in a 3-hour period. Jackelyn answered none of them. For those who studied domestic violence patterns, this silence would have been particularly threatening to someone like Ruffin. Abusers rely on control, and when that control is challenged, when their messages go unanswered, when their possessions are discarded, the risk of violence increases exponentially. Tuesday, October 1st. The second day of the countdown began with Jackelyn taking her children to school as usual. Neighbors reported seeing her at the bus stop maintaining normalcy for her children despite whatever turmoil she must have been feeling. What she didn't know was that she was being watched. As evening fell, a neighbor returning from work noticed an SUV parked in the shadows of the apartment complex lot. Inside sat Howard Ruffin, his gaze fixed on Jackelyn's apartment. When he looked up and saw me looking at him because I had to pass him, I just rushed away from him, the neighbor later told investigators. I can't explain the feeling I got, but it wasn't a good feeling. This behavior, surveillance of a former partner, is what experts call stalking in plain sight. It's a tactic that serves dual purposes, gathering information about the victim's movements while simultaneously letting them know they're being watched. Whether Jackelyn knew Ruffin was outside that night remains unknown. The neighbor, sensing danger but unsure what to do, didn't call police. Like so many bystanders who glimpse pieces of domestic violence situations, she hesitated to get involved, a hesitation she would later regret deeply. Wednesday, October 2nd. The final morning of Jackelyn Wilson's life began like any other. She woke her children, prepared them for school, and started the morning routine that had defined her role as a mother. Her children, ages 4 through 10, were getting ready for their day, unaware that everything was about to change. At 7:58 a.m., a security camera at the apartment complex captured Howard Ruffin's arrival. He parked directly in front of Jackelyn's unit, not hiding, not attempting to conceal his presence. This wasn't a crime of passion or a spontaneous act. The footage shows a man who had made a decision and come to carry it out. At 7:59 a.m., Ruffin entered the apartment. What happened next was captured in horrifying clarity by the complex's security system. The entire encounter lasted just 25 seconds. An argument erupted immediately upon his entry. Then, multiple gunshots. At 8 a.m., the camera recorded Ruffin exiting the apartment and driving away. In less than half a minute, 4 children had become motherless. Inside the apartment, a scene of chaos and terror unfolded from the children's perspective. The gunshots, the sight of their mother falling, the sudden understanding that they were in danger. These moments would forever alter their lives. The oldest child, demonstrating remarkable presence of mind amid unimaginable trauma, gathered his younger siblings. Together, they fled the apartment and ran toward the bus stop where they knew other adults would be present.
First, though, breaking news in Northwest Houston. A woman shot and killed at an apartment complex on Willow Place Drive just south of Highway 249. A crew arrived at the scene in the past hour, and this is what they've learned. Houston police calling a man who was inside that apartment, possibly the victim's boyfriend, a person of interest. Witnesses say he ran from the scene. Officers tell us 2 children were inside that apartment at the time of the shooting. If you know anything that can help, call Crime Stoppers.
2 women waiting with their own children saw the Wilson children approaching and initially thought they were simply late for school. "We were like, hey, you all missed the bus," one witness recounted. Her little 6-year-old was like, "I know, but he shot my mom." Those 9 words, spoken with the devastating directness only a child can manage, set in motion the emergency response that would soon fill the apartment complex. The women immediately called 911 and rushed to the apartment, hoping to help Jackelyn, but it was already too late. She had succumbed to multiple gunshot wounds before help could arrive. As police secured the scene and paramedics confirmed what the children already knew, a community began to grapple with a tragedy that had unfolded in plain sight, with warning signs visible to neighbors, family members, and law enforcement alike.
And the good news here, the only good news in a very tragic situation, police do appear to know who they're looking for. They are not, however, publicly naming him tonight, which is why we cannot show you his face. They're also not confirming if investigators are reviewing this video we're about to show you. They do, however, tell us the victim and the suspect were no strangers to one another.
He shot my mom.
Heartbreaking words from a little boy this morning outside the Willow Green Apartments. He and his brother inside this second-floor unit just after 8 when this man walks in. Then an argument with their mom.
Oh, really? Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
A gunshot, soon followed by 8 more as their target screams in agony. You then see the man walk out and calmly walk away, a mere 20 seconds after he arrived.
For a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old to actually run out to say that they seen somebody shoot their mom and, in front of them.
This woman, who asked not to be identified, says she raced with the boys back to their apartment to find their mom badly bleeding.
And we went in there and she was just gasping for air like,
She says they used towels to try and apply pressure to her wounds, while one of her sons comforted her.
It just hurt our heart because he was just saying, "Mama, stay with us." Mama, stay with us, it's gonna be okay. But
sadly, things weren't okay. The victim succumbing to her injuries, her neighbors left in abject disbelief.
Who does that? That's what you call somebody who doesn't have a heart, who's heartless.
And neighbors tell us they've seen that man you just saw in that video at the victim's apartment in the past. They say the two had a tumultuous relationship, and one woman tells us he would periodically camp out in his car out in the parking lot in order to keep tabs on the victim. Live downtown, Luke Jones, ABC 13, Eyewitness News.
This is where I need to pause our story and speak directly to you, our viewers. Cases like Jackelyn's aren't just tragedies to be observed. They're urgent calls to action. If you're watching this and recognize similar patterns in your own relationship or in someone you know, please understand that threats should always be taken seriously. Have you ever witnessed warning signs of domestic violence but weren't sure how to respond? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help others recognize dangerous situations before they escalate. If you're finding value in this examination of systemic failures and missed opportunities, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to True Crime Malice. Your support helps us continue highlighting cases that demand accountability and change. Now let's return to the aftermath of those devastating 25 seconds and the investigation that would reveal just how preventable this tragedy truly was. As police cruisers and ambulances converged on Willow Green Apartments, the two women who had encountered the children attempted to save Jackelyn's life. One applied pressure to the gunshot wounds, while the other stayed on the line with 911 dispatchers, relaying vital information. Despite their efforts, paramedics pronounced Jackelyn Wilson dead at the scene. Her children just sat there beside her, one of the women later recalled, her voice breaking. Not crying, not speaking, just sitting there next to his mom while we tried to help her. The Houston Police Department immediately identified Howard Ruffin as the suspect. His image was captured clearly on security footage, and multiple witnesses, including Jackelyn's children, identified him without hesitation. A citywide alert went out, warning that Ruffin was armed and dangerous. What investigators didn't expect was what happened next. Just hours after the shooting, Ruffin contacted Houston Police Department's Homicide Division directly. In a brief conversation, he agreed to turn himself in and provide a statement. By nightfall, he was in custody. During questioning, Ruffin offered no denial of his actions. According to case documents, he acknowledged entering the apartment and confronting Jackelyn. While the full contents of his statement remain sealed pending trial, sources close to the investigation indicate he showed little remorse, instead focusing on his perceived grievances about the relationship's end. Miles away, Denise Bibbs was going about her day when her phone rang. The moment she heard the words "homicide detective," a mother's intuition took over. "The first thing I asked was, did Howard Ruffin kill my daughter?" Bibbs later shared. The detective's silence before confirming was answer enough. For Bibbs, the news was devastating but not entirely surprising. She had witnessed the relationship's volatility firsthand and had urged her daughter to leave Ruffin numerous times. Now she faced not only the loss of her daughter, but also the responsibility of raising Jackelyn's 4 traumatized children. "I welcomed him into my home and I treated him like a son," Bibbs said, her voice hardening. "And he repaid me by taking my daughter from me." The Harris County District Attorney's Office moved swiftly, charging Ruffin with first-degree murder. Given the premeditated nature of the crime, prosecutors announced they would seek the maximum penalty, life imprisonment. In an unusual move, they also launched an internal investigation into how Ruffin's case had been handled prior to the murder. "We need to understand where the system failed," stated a spokesperson for the DA's office. "This case reveals concerning gaps in how we track violent offenders and protect potential victims." At Ruffin's arraignment, prosecutors successfully argued against any possibility of bond, citing his history of violence and the brutal nature of the crime. The judge agreed, ordering Ruffin held without bail pending trial. Sitting in the courtroom that day was Denise Bibbs, her face a mask of grief and determination. When asked by reporters why she had come, her answer revealed the strength that would carry her through the difficult months ahead. "Every day he goes to court, I want him to see my husband and I's face," she declared. "I want him to look at us and know what he took from this world. I want him to see us standing there for Jackelyn because she can't stand for herself anymore." This commitment to attend every hearing, every procedural motion, every moment of the trial became Bibbs' way of honoring her daughter, while simultaneously raising her 4 grandchildren and helping them process their trauma. She refused to allow the legal system to proceed without a physical reminder of the life that had been lost. "The system failed my daughter once," Bibbs said outside the courthouse. "I'm not going to let it happen again." Jackelyn Wilson's murder wasn't just a tragedy, it was a preventable one. Each year in America, approximately 1,000 women are killed by current or former partners, and in most cases the warning signs are visible long before the fatal incident occurs. The red flags in Jackelyn's case were textbook: a documented history of violence, explicit threats, strangulation in a previous assault, stalking behavior, and escalation following her attempt to end the relationship. These weren't subtle hints, They were blaring alarms that multiple systems failed to heed. What makes this case particularly devastating is how many intervention points existed, from the initial 3-day sentence for assault in Walker County to the missed protective order, from the miscommunication between counties to the final bond decision. At each juncture, different choices could have saved Jackelyn's life. For those currently living in situations similar to Jackelyn's, this case offers both warning and hope. The warning is clear. Threats of violence must always be taken seriously, especially when made by someone with a history of abuse. The hope lies in knowing that resources exist, even when the system fails. National hotlines provide confidential support and safety planning. Local shelters offer emergency housing. Legal advocates can help navigate protective orders. And increasingly, specialized high-risk assessment teams in many jurisdictions work to identify the most dangerous situations before they turn deadly. Perhaps the most important lesson from Jackelyn's story is that domestic violence thrives in silence. When neighbors overheard Ruffin's death threat but didn't report it, when communication between counties broke down, when Jackelyn herself felt unable to fully cooperate with authorities, these silences created space for violence to escalate. Denise Bibbs, while raising her 4 grandchildren, has become an outspoken advocate for system reform. "My daughter's death needs to mean something," she insists. "It needs to change how we handle these cases, how we communicate between agencies, how seriously we take threats." The children who witnessed their mother's murder are receiving specialized trauma therapy, but the road ahead is long. The youngest, just 4 years old, still asks when his mother is coming home. The oldest, who led his siblings to safety that morning, carries a burden no child should bear. Their future and the futures of countless children in similar situations depends on our collective willingness to recognize warning signs, report concerns, and hold systems accountable when they fail. As we conclude Jackelyn's story, I want to ask you, what would you do if you overheard someone threatening a partner's life? Would you know how to respond? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insight might help someone else recognize a dangerous situation. If this case has affected you or made you think differently about domestic violence, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to True Crime Malice. Your engagement helps us continue highlighting cases that demand attention and change. And if you're watching this while living in fear, please know that Jackelyn's story doesn't have to be yours. Help is available. Reach out. Break the silence. Because threats should never be dismissed, and no one deserves to have violence fulfill a promise made in anger.